It's a big world out there. Welcome to Bigfoot's Wilderness Podcast.
Welcome back to Bigfoot's Wilderness, Episode 6. I've got a great guest lined up tonight, along with a very interesting story that I don't think many people are aware of. It's actually one of my favorites. But first, we have a caller who experienced something unusual with his son.
So I'm calling about an incident that my son, when he was visiting me one weekend in February of 2016, and we were at my home, and I asked him to, he was aware that I've had frequent encounters in the area, and so he decided to stay up late with me and to sit outside until hopefully get an encounter on his own. We set up two chairs, and both of he and I were sitting in the same direction, and we were listening to them making calls. And while they were making calls, we tried to respond, and they responded sometimes, and then all of a sudden it got quiet. And at that time when it got quiet, I told them, I said, "Hey, turn your chair around," because what frequently happens is that if we're both facing the same direction, they'll walk behind us. And so when they as soon as I turned my chair around, he said, "Hey, I just seen one cross the path. I saw something that looked like a cat that crossed the path on the driveway, and but I noticed that when it extended its leg, I realized that, hey, that's not a cat. That cat doesn't have a leg that goes out that long." And so I said, "All right, well, let me kind of walk up that direction. You stay where you are, and I'll just walk up to where you saw it, and you tell me if I'm bigger or smaller." And, we're talking at least 100 yards away. And so by the time I walked up the path and I hadn't arrived at the location where he had seen the, creature that crossed the path, and he said, "Oh, stop right there." He said, "Even right from where you're standing, you are half the size of what was on all fours crossing the path." And the interesting part about it is that I had my flashlight on me, and I asked him which direction it would go in, and he said it went towards the right. And when I looked, and I put my flashlight on, and I shined it across this pine tree that was there, and lo and behold, the creature was hiding behind the pine tree, because I got eye shine right behind him, about 7 feet in the air. There was just a single eye looking at me. It blinked, and then I told him, I said, hey, come up here, take a look at this. But there was a deer in the distance, and then it quickly took off after that deer. So, but that was my encounter with my son visiting me that weekend, and was not the only one, but I hope to share other encounters with you in the future. Thanks for listening.
That call did come from Virginia. Big cat or Bigfoot? My money's on Bigfoot. Thanks for the call. So next up is my guest for the show. Kassem G is a comedian and actor best known for his online content. His YouTube channel, Kassem G, has several hundred videos, most notably the California On, Going Deep, and Street Music web series. Definitely a professional, not a stranger to the streaming media platform known as YouTube. As a matter of fact, he won the 2013 Streamy Award for Best Host for his work on California On. That's kind of like an Oscar for YouTube. But the thing about Kassem that really caught my interest is his fascination with cryptids, but in particular, Bigfoot. Here's our conversation. Please welcome Kassem. I think you'll find him very interesting.
Well, Kassem, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, and
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know it's a little awkward with the whole Skype or Zoom, trying to make this work with audio or video if there is any lag time, but it's a challenge we'll get over. I've done this enough times that I can make it work, and I think you can too. You're the king of ad lib. I've watched you for years,
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, that's just from a whole lifetime of being scared, and growing up fearful and getting picked on. But I appreciate that. That's very nice. I love anything related to Bigfoot and or the paranormal or anything high strangeness. And I think I've only been asked to do like a couple very specifically Bigfoot podcasts, but it's never one where I have to be like, well, let me see. Let me see if I vibe with this guy's comedic sensibility. No, if it's about Bigfoot, I'm generally in 100%.
Okay, because I got to tell you, when I watched you so many years ago while you were, and I'm kind of jumping ahead on the questions, but when I did see you talk about it, I thought you were absolutely dead on serious. And I know you're a comedian, so I wasn't sure 100%, but I said, this guy looks like he's really into Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And you've always piqued my curiosity, so.
Yeah, I am into it. I guess I was probably more into it. At one point, because I had made a sort of 30-minute, I don't want to call it a mockumentary, but it was essentially me and my camera crew going on the road to go just, we did this with ghosts too, where we would go and try and do earnest investigation, just like how you would see on, Ghost Adventures or like hunting Bigfoot or, I'm sorry, finding Bigfoot. And we tried to do everything that those guys did in the shows to see if it worked. And also, and not poke fun at it and just let the experience speak for itself. And so I did one of those. It was 30 minutes long. It was in 2015. And that was when I kind of immersed myself. But my whole life, honestly, I had been so fascinated. And it started, probably around the time I think the Leonard Nimoy In Search Of, I caught that, series on Bigfoot with him. And because of the gravitas in his voice and just how serious he sounded about it, I mean, it wasn't if the creature existed. It was more like, well, how soon will it be until we find him? That was sort of like always the attitude I adopted with him.
Yeah, I think.
Are you getting feedback? Sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, but I don't know if it's my fault or not.
I don't hear any feedback at all. You
Okay,
sound
good.
fantastic.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
I was just going to say that Leonard Nimoy is obviously one of those personalities that you remember him as the rational, logical Spock. So when he spoke, it was matter of fact. So it wasn't about if, it was about when.
Absolutely, yeah. And so when I was younger, and I don't know how old you are, but you sound like you're probably around in your 30s, and if you're younger, I apologize. But there wasn't a lot of content for us to absorb. There was never enough stuff about Bigfoot to watch. Eventually, like Monster Quest came around. It kind of gave us like a sort of episodic version of it, and then it introduced me to things like Dogman and Mothman and a lot of other cryptids that are interesting in their own right. But I always kind of had, because of Harry and the Hendersons and that sort of that early exposure, I always kind of had that soft spot for Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
Right. Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go with a 30s comment. I'm nowhere near it, but I'm a lot older than that. But I'm glad that I have a youthful voice.
You have a youth. There's a youth about you.
I was told the other day that I have a great voice and that someone wanted me to come in and possibly do some voiceover work. And I said, man, that's great.
No, you do. Yeah. You sound, like you probably worked in radio at some point in your life, but
never. But let's talk about Bigfoot, because
if we can just do another 20 minutes on your voice and anything else inside of you. Okay. But yeah, we can. Yeah, let's talk Bigfoot.
That does sound like another subject.
Yeah.
But to back up just a little bit, because Of course, I'll do a little piece before this, but I just want to say congratulations on Pajama Pants because I've been listening to this for a couple of weeks now, and I'm a big Sopranos fan. And when I found it on Apple Podcasts, I started listening along with Talking Sopranos, and
Yeah.
it was just such a great mix of the two. You guys were doing uh, interviews with the same people that Talking Sopranos was doing, and yours were completely different and just as much fun to listen to. I really enjoyed them.
Well, yeah, no, thank you so much. You know, so I do this podcast. For anyone who doesn't know, it's with Robert Eiler and Jamie Lynn Sigler, and they were AJ and Meadow on The Sopranos. And it's just the three of us. And I had been friends with Rob. I met Rob shooting a pilot years ago, and we kind of just got to be friends. And then he introduced me to Jamie, and so the three of us do a podcast that's not, and it's not intended to be a Sopranos podcast, but you know, a lot of what comes up is their experience and time on the show. But once we started it a few months later, a bunch of rewatch podcasts kind of started. And so, which is good because it gives people an opportunity, like if they really want to hear actors from the show go episode by episode, they have that option. And if they want to hear actors from the show talk about anything else, and or including the show, then we have a show, and then we a lot of times guest on each other's shows, and it's actually been super fun and real easy. And you know, I think it's given me enough sort of confidence to start my own podcast, which I will, once I do, I will come back onto your podcast to plug it, but it
Oh, that'd be
could
great.
very well be cryptid related.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to consider it competition. I just want to say it would only be, you know, my point of view about certain things, and it would cover a wide swath of topics, including Bigfoot and, you know, UFOs and paranormal stuff. Because let's be honest, it's a lot more fun to think about that stuff than what's going on, at least for me, than what's going on in the world right now. So it's kind of a little bit of escapism, which I like.
Yeah, amen. It's a crazy world right now. I have 4 different masks that I can wear outside whenever I go somewhere, and that's about the most interesting thing. I mean, you don't even give people eye contact anymore, but it's a
Yeah, well,
strange
thanks
world.
for wearing a mask. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know how that became political or when it did, but it's just, it seems like one of those things that every day there's somebody getting upset about having to wear one when all it does is just protect yourself and people around you. So
Yeah.
good on you. And if you're listening to this, I hope you wear your mask out there.
It just means that you're showing a sign of respect to the company that you're visiting. You know, they don't want to kick you out. They want your money. They don't want to have to reprimand you or say something. They don't want other people to frown at you. Just as a sign of respect, wear the mask.
Yeah. Great advice.
Yep. So since I know a little of your background, and you're obviously a comedian first and foremost, the first time I saw you was on the Shaytards. And for those who don't know what the Shaytards are, it's a guy by the name of Shay Carl, right? Is that right? Shay Carl?
Yep. Uh-huh.
And he had a little channel going on there with hundreds of millions of views of him and his family doing that little trip back and forth from Idaho to LA, and things that happened with them wherever they were visiting, just kind of recording life. And you were on there a lot. I mean, I just remember seeing you standing in the backyard with the big Great Dane and just having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, he was, you know, among the first. I don't know if he was the first or, you know, among the first, but people to do these video logs, and they're popularly called vlogs now. But it was essentially just home movies that he would shoot every day and upload. And you would kind of develop an attachment to him and his family, and they're, you know, a big, happy family. And he was just a buddy of mine that I met through the internet. So, you know, I would just go over to hang out with him, and then, you know, more to my annoyance, I would end up on the videos because there's there's never going to be a time where he doesn't pull out the camera eventually, because part of what's so grueling about that job is that he had to film and put out a new video every day, and he did that for I don't know how many years in a row, but it was, yeah, I know the way you make it sound in your questions, like, yeah, almost like a guest star on a TV show that would come in, but it was, yeah, it was more just me hanging with a buddy, but yeah, and that was just a friend, and I did my own things online, and we kind of just developed this sort of off-camera friendship, which turned into an on-camera friendship, and I got really close with his, whole family, and he lives in Idaho, and Idaho will eventually relate back to my Bigfoot story, but yeah, he's doing well, and I think as we've gotten older, the grind of making videos kind of wore down on us, and a lot of us just kind of either stopped or slowed down or just kind of started pursuing other things. But I'm glad you found me through there.
Yeah, and the great thing about it, well, I guess the not so great thing for you was it was hours or days or weeks, but for me, it was 10 minutes at a time. So when I would watch
Sure.
the video and I would see you, you'd be on there and you'd kind of lighten the mood a little bit, or just bring up something, and it was variety. It wasn't the same.
Yeah, we had
shape.
this odd couple sort of relationship where he's this big, bright, colorful family man, and I really like to lean in as this sort of like pessimistic, grumpy, almost depressed single guy, but I'm not going to say that's not true, but I think we leaned into it a little bit, but we always had such opposing views on a lot of things, and I think that's what we got a big kick out of, kind of ping ponging back and forth on that stuff, and it made for pretty fun videos, I'd say.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of where he bought this great big piece of land. And I think it was not long after he started, having the house redone and uh, putting big tractors in his barn and putting in, everything that he needed for his family, that you were there. And I think you were kind of doing an interview, and the subject of Bigfoot came up. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess the question I just have to ask you is, did you did you hike his area, or did you research his area? Because at that point, was that where you believed in Bigfoot, or were you, again, did you say it was back to the Leonard Nimoy days and you just kind of had it in the back of your head, and then Shay bought this big piece of property and then you're out walking it, I think you are, and you kind of
Right.
come to a conclusion that you believe in Bigfoot?
Okay, so this is kind of how it happened. I was a big, and still to this day, if you ask me if I believe in Bigfoot or not, my answer is I want to believe, and I wholeheartedly believe that he could exist. I don't know if I can say that for sure 100% I believe, and I think that's probably where most people, and especially probably listening to this, unless they've had their own encounter, which I am so jealous. I mean, not jealous necessarily because of the sheer fear of probably seeing one of these in real life could really do a lot of trauma to me. But I would love. Let me just say, I would love to see one from a safe distance, But I when I was up at Shay's, and I think what you're talking about is I did a podcast of his where we were talking about um, the existence of Bigfoot and aliens and stuff like that. And when I had recorded that podcast, I had just finished interviewing. Man, I hope my timeline's right, but I'm pretty sure it was right after I interviewed Dr. Jeff Meldrum, because he, for those of you that kind of follow the Bigfoot community, he's the director of anthropology at Idaho State University, and he's also in every Bigfoot show you've ever seen as the expert on footprints and casts and like mid-tarsal ridges and just prints in general. And so I went to his office in the university and just interviewed him for my 30-minute special, which I mentioned earlier, because he was the guy that I said, if I'm going to do this show and I want to do it in earnest, I want to get the experts in the field. And to me, he was one of the few experts that seemed like he was honest, and he seemed like he knew what he was talking about. He's a professor. So there's all these things. It's not like I went out and I interviewed Todd Standing, which I had, very different views on. To me, Dr. Jeff Meldrum's kind of has this sort of, well, if he's in your video, there's a little bit of legitness that he adds to it. And he's just so knowledgeable. So I had gone there. He gave me the whole tour of all the casts. I bought a Patty cast. That's the cast that I have in the background of my podcast that I do. And, he also showed me a number of different casts, and he even showed me a butt print of a supposedly a print from when a Bigfoot had laid down and it left a butt. I mean, there's no other way to say it except there's just a butt imprint, and he was able to kind of ascertain that it was a female based on the type of print, and it was fun and it was great. And he is a believer that they're, an ancient hominid species that's just managed to survive in small numbers. And I like to consider myself not a very smart man, but I do know a smart man when I see them. And if this guy has dedicated a large portion of his life to researching this subject, then all I can really do is listen and assume that he kind of has a knowledge that I don't about a subject. So yeah, I went there, and since he's very close to where Shay lives in Idaho, I went and I think talked to Shay about it, and even had Shay in the video. I brought him along to go meet Dr. Meldrum, and that was fun. It was a really fun day for me. You're just in this giant laboratory where there's nothing but different kinds of casts. There's hair DNA samples. Something he mentioned while I was there that I thought was disgusting and also fascinating was that he just gets sent boxes of scat and poop, and from random people that think they stumbled across Bigfoot poop, and he will just have somebody mail him a soggy box filled with poop, and then they expect him to kind of analyze it and get back to him. So he says that's kind of one of the downsides of what he has become in the Bigfoot community, and how sort of he's a prominent figure, and with that comes these sort of downsides. But yeah, so that was actually on the tail end of my Bigfoot expedition. Before that, we had spent a lot of time in Northern California, and we went to Willow Creek, and Willow Creek is essentially the town that you would go to if you were going to make a trip to Bluff Creek. It's I think a short drive, then a little hike from Willow Creek to Bluff Creek, where the PG film was shot. But on the days that we went to Willow Creek, there's a once a year Bigfoot parade. Or it's a very small town. There's one main street that runs through it, and there's a tiny parade, and everything in this town is Bigfoot related. You can tell that a huge portion of the tourism that this town sees is all people that are coming in to see Bigfoot stuff. So every store is outfitted with Bigfoot stuff. Even the gas station has like Bigfoot. I mean, there's the Bigfoot restaurant. I mean, there's all this stuff, and we just kind of interviewed the people that live there, and some of the Native Americans that live in and around there. I think it's the Hoopa tribe, and the Hoopa tribe have they have their own legend. And I think what's great about Sasquatch lore is that every Native American tribe has their own story about what these creatures could be. And the Hoopa's story was that they were a hairy man that um, that was a Hoopa Indian. I'm probably butchering the story. It's been years, but I believe that they were part of the tribe, but then they were outcast, and they made some sort of pact with this group of hairy men to leave them to their side of uh, the mountains, and in turn they would leave the Hoopa tribe alone. But they had this sort of non-violent pact with them, and they have their own word for them, just like every tribe does, and it's not a question of whether these things exist to them. They are told at a young age that there is another tribe of people, and this tribe just happens to be taller, bigger, and hairier, and it's a fact to them. And I find that fascinating, and I think that's great. And to me, there's a lot of value to be learned from people that have grown up in an area over generations. That's where the stories, I think, are most interesting. When you hear stories that are passed down, and passed down, it's just different than a guy who sees something out in the back of his like field one day. There's it kind of makes you understand that this is something that's happened for a long time. Um, there's just an understanding and an acceptance that there's something else out there that we here in like the city refuse to believe exists. I think that's the sociological element of all that is also what's really interesting to me.
I think your story's pretty spot on. I think you've got that legend about right, and I think in Oklahoma there's also a similar uh, Indian lore or legend, and they call Bigfoots or Bigfoot, Big Feet, whatever. They call them the tall ones, and
Yeah.
very similar. So I guess not only is he a social distancing champion, he sometimes doesn't get along with the people around him.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I don't get along with some of my neighbors, so I can totally understand.
Same here.
Can totally understand that. Yeah. And what's fascinating is that we've found graves and things of just like 7, 8 foot tall skeletons, and I mean there is physical proof that there were uh, and could I mean maybe not more recently, but there were very tall beings that were alive and they were bipedal, and I don't know. I think that stuff I've fallen down the hole of that stuff, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have as well. But it's so interesting to me, and the more I dig, the more I feel like the less I understand about it all, and especially once people start talking about interdimensional stuff, and that used to lose me a lot. I used to kind of enter this world with like a very practical lens where, well, they're probably either Gigantopithecus or related to, and they've, if you've seen the size of the Pacific Northwest, if you've ever been there, and when we were there shooting, to me, it is not crazy to think that um, a few hundred or 1,000 of these things could just be, because there's just so much forest and it's so dense. And we did experiments like, all right, you stand here, I'm going to go into this tree line, I'll go 10 feet in, and you tell me if you can see me or not. And we would disappear 8 to 12 feet into the tree line. It is not crazy to think something that's evolved to be in that sort of uh, environment would just be able to not be seen for this long.
I've heard that. I've never been there, but I've heard the woods are, mysterious and deep and expansive, and you just simply can't put your arms around a particular area and say, yeah, nothing could live here. I mean, I've heard stories of planes that have gone down in the Pacific Northwest that have never been found, and a plane, excuse me, is a lot bigger than a Bigfoot, and for something to crash and never be discovered or found
Yeah,
tells you how massive it is.
absolutely.
So, is there a particular And I guess we were talking a little legend there, but is there a particular Bigfoot story or film that comes to mind when you think of the subject? Like, is there one thing that you kind of refer to or relate to that you say, this is the best evidence, or this is what I kind of perceive Bigfoot to be?
Um, you know, whenever we talk videos, I instantly think of the Patterson-Gimlin film and how hotly debated that's been and how much uh, controversy it stirred up. And, I can understand when somebody goes, it looks like a man in the suit upon like a first viewing of it. But the more I look at it, the more I just go like, it just doesn't seem like a person in a suit to me. But um, that piece of video would not be the piece of video I would show somebody if they were like, well, show me something, because of how, famous it is. And it's been popularized, and it's been put on shirts, and it's on, this and that. So there's been some footage. I think there's been a couple skunk ape, and I apologize, I don't know the names of the people who shot them, but if you've seen videos, there's a couple videos where they're in a swamp, and there's clearly something with its back turned, and it looks like it's looking for grubs, and it's like tearing into a tree bark, and it doesn't look like it would be the size of a regular ape to me, but it does look ape-like, and it looks much larger, and the shoulders are so broad, and the movements are so specifically non-human. Um, I like those videos, and I do like, I think the thermal. I think Stacy Brown has some thermal videos that are very interesting to me. Um, but to be honest, a lot of the video evidence out there is just, I wouldn't show it to somebody I was trying to convince, and it's unfortunate. And gosh, wouldn't I look like such an idiot if Todd Standing's footage was somehow proven to be real one day? I feel like when I look at any of his pictures or videos, I'm so disappointed, and I feel like it sets the it sets us back as a community so far to give this guy this much attention. I don't doubt that maybe Todd Standing had an experience at one point, but I think he understands that there's money to be made in it, and is trying to hang on to whatever sort of name recognition he has. But the stuff that gets me is the thermal stuff. Stacy Brown has a great thermal video, but it's always the eyewitness accounts, and Les Stroud, Survivor Man, which more recently in the last few years has kind of come out with his experiences, and even some specials. And I always think those are fascinating. There's another podcast that I listen to with that I believe sometimes. Um, I listen to every sort of encounter that I can, because I like to think of myself as somebody who can hear when somebody is making up a story, and as somebody who's done a lot of comedy and improvised a lot, I can kind of tell when somebody's doing it. I don't know if that makes sense, but if somebody's details aren't too specific, or if it seems like the choice that they made in their story seems a little too easy, it's always the weird stuff that gets me. When somebody has a really weird fact, and they also sound earnest, my ears perk up. And there was a story where I heard some guy who ended up like befriending a lady who had befriended a family of these things, and she was like feeding them and letting them like come in and out of her house, and showing them episodes of SpongeBob, and like this guy was attracted to one of the young females, and it was so crazy to me,
You
and it
know,
sounded so out of this world, that part of me was like, and this guy also sounded like a huge creep when he was talking about the female Bigfoot that he was attracted to. He sounded like so much of a creep. It's like, I don't know who would want to sound like this just for this interview. And he's, it's some of this has to be, if just one of these stories is real, and everyone always says that if just one of these stories is real, that's enough,
Right.
So you
So
sometimes have to sift through it, I think.
that particular story was on Sasquatch Chronicles, and
Yeah.
Wes Germer interviewed him. I listened to that story. I thought it was a bit far-fetched as well.
It was so insane.
But there's
But
a lot
why?
of that out there.
Yeah. I don't understand why somebody, I guess maybe there's been part of me that's been like, you should just kind of come up with a character and call into Sasquatch Chronicles and just like see if you can completely fabricate a whole story. And but then I'm like, I don't want to do that because that's not a great thing to do to somebody. But Sasquatch Chronicles is one of those podcasts I've had a very tenuous relationship with. I used to listen to it, and then there was a lot of drama, and there was a lot of people saying that they were making it all up. At the end of the day, I like to be entertained, and sometimes I feel like I can really tell when something is phony and made up, and then sometimes those interviews where you're like, you know what, that person didn't even sound like they wanted to be on the phone. They sounded scared when they were talking about it. There's some of those interviews I'm just like, well, that could be a real thing, and I have to give him credit for doing it for that long, and at least keeping us entertained for this long.
Well, to be honest, everybody Wes has on, and I don't know him at all. I'm just calling him by his first name. But everybody he has on, I don't know why you would do it. You're not doing it for name recognition or for any type of money. And I'm not saying not everybody's pure of heart, but I'm not
Right.
quite sure why you would do it. Just for any reason whatsoever to go on there and tell your story and not want anything from it. So, because people typically want their 15 minutes of fame or something, right?
Right. Totally. And they will often say at the end of their interviews, "Hey, Wes, thank you so much. I used to really never share this kind of stuff, but I've since reaching out, I found a community of people that have had similar. It's like people who've had a trauma meeting each other and realizing they can get through it together, and they can talk about it with each other without fear of being ostracized by their family and their community, which I think even if most of those interviews are fake, I don't know if they are or not, but if there have been real encounters and those people have felt some sort of relief by coming on the show, that to me is reason enough to keep doing it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying therapy. It's great. It's great for everyone.
That's right. Therapy is good. You're right. Doesn't matter what kind of therapy it is, as long as it's therapy. The question that I ask everybody, and obviously you haven't, at least you haven't told me that you've had an encounter, but do you think this Bigfoot could be possibly an undiscovered ape, or could it be a type of Neanderthal? Do you have any, or even an alien? I mean, people have just kind of put it out there these days. There's so many stories about Bigfoot's holding glowing balls and lights in the sky, and I don't know
Right.
what to believe these days, but I don't dismiss it. I let everybody talk and share their story if they so want to. But what do you think it is, if you had to make a guess just from things you've read and puzzles you've put together, pieces you've put together in your head and said, well, this plus this equals this. What's your best guess?
My thoughts on this have definitely changed over the years, but I also waffle so much. A big part of me just wants to say it's either some on the branch of some sort of ape, right? On the tree of apes. If it's related to Gigantopithecus, we know that those exist. We have skulls and bones from that creature. So we know at one point on this planet that there were 8 to 10 foot giant ape-like bipedal creatures on this planet, and that to me is that is more than we've ever gotten from really any other cryptid or aliens and things like that. We have proof that something similar had, and by the way, I think aliens to me is an easier jump to make. I think aliens are or at least one point have come here. Um, but we'll save that for a different podcast. I don't want to make it seem like I don't believe in aliens. I do. But when it comes to Bigfoot, I like to sit on the more practical scientific side of some sort of ancient hominid. And um, I've seen how vast and thick the Pacific Northwest is. It's not crazy to me that it could exist out there. And it's even not crazy to me that it could exist in other states like Texas and, like you said, Oklahoma and Florida. And when I hear the relationship with aliens, and when I hear a lot of the encounters that involve glowing orbs and things like that and interdimensional stuff, I tend to dismiss it quicker because I just simply don't understand it. And that's not good of me. I need to at least have an open mind, that and trust that that person saw what they saw. And I think it's the fact that we can't understand what an interdimensional being really is and how it could function and why they would have Sasquatch here, and what the relationship between them would be. I've heard very credible encounters from people that just saw lights and then or saw a UFO and then had their Bigfoot encounter, or saw Bigfoot then saw lights. So many of those that it would be a little arrogant of me to dismiss all that. For me, I think I just feel more comfortable, and that's why. And I'm not saying that's a good thing to do. It's just more comfortable for me to be like, well, it's something that evolved on this planet alongside us, that maybe at one point were in larger numbers and now aren't, and now have understood that humans are a threat and can they understand what guns are, and they like have um, a way of living that identifies us as people to not be around, and so they've developed and evolved into a creature that avoids us, which is not crazy to me. But I honestly, I waffle on this all the time, and that's really all I think I can say about it. I would like to understand it, but if somebody at the end of the day, and I turned on CNN tomorrow and it said, yeah, these things come from another dimension. Oh, by the way, there's another dimension and there's all this other stuff. I'd be like, okay, that's fine. You know, I'd be okay.
Right.
Yeah,
I think you're basically saying you're keeping an open mind, right?
I have to. Yeah.
That's fair enough. I mean, that's what else could you say? So, uh, slightly changing gears, but do you think Bigfoot has become a pop culture icon? It seems to me like you can't get
Yeah.
away from the fact that there's coffee mugs and T-shirts and toys, and I mean,
Right.
it's been going on for years. But I mean, are you seeing that as well, or is it just me? Because
Yeah.
I'm kind of deep into it. So
Yes, I do think it's definitely in the popular culture. I think you have Harry and the Hendersons to thank for that. I think you have, um, you know, you have a lot of, you have a lot of, you know what? Also, I noticed like a lot of the companies in the outdoor retail space, like there's like, uh, you know, a lot of camping and like outdoor recreational stuff that all kind of has like a Bigfoot motif now to it too.
Mhm.
As a sidebar, but I'm looking at right now a Bigfoot lunchbox that I have, and I have that I got up in the Bigfoot Museum up near Felton, California. There is just something that makes it work as one of those things out there that looks good on a shirt, or it looks good on the back window of your car. And movies like Harry and the Hendersons that portrayed Bigfoot as like this big, fun, hairy, lovable creature that will look out for your family, I think is part of the reason for that. Based on all the evidence and the encounters I've listened to, I don't think that's the case with if he's a real thing. I don't think that I would want to try and strap them to the hood of my car and drive them to my home in Seattle and try and keep them in my basement. I understand that it makes for great entertainment, and but there's a two-edged sword there. It's great because it gets people interested into the field that would normally be scared or just not into it. If, like me, if you saw Harry and the Hendersons at a young age, that was kind of like your entry point. And you're like, oh, that's kind of fun. Like, what's that based on? And where did that come from? And then on the other side, it makes the mainstream public dismiss people who have had encounters as like crazy or just on drugs or meth or like. So there's this sort of double-edged sword that it's great because it's brought people into the community that otherwise wouldn't, and then it's kind of put a stigma on people in the community because it seems so hokey, and there's cartoons and there's movies, and you can't actually believe in that thing, right? So there's that whole thing, but it is without a doubt in the popular culture.
Well, I can say 100% that when I had my experience in Virginia, I thought I was being pranked the entire time. I didn't even believe it. I thought it was a joke. I'll give you just a quick, for the people out there that have heard my podcast before, I'm sorry for the 25th time if I've said this, but I'll just say it one more time.
No, I'd love to hear. Just give me the clip notes, I guess, then, because I'd love to.
We went on my family. We just went to a cabin for 2 days just to get away, and I did not even know where we were going. My wife had picked it was an Airbnb. She picked it. We just drove there. I got behind the wheel, drove the car, got there, and it was in Greene County, Virginia, with an E. I won't give too specific an address because I don't have permission to share where it happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that we pulled up. We put our clothes and bags and stuff in the cabin, and my son and I went outside and we walked around, and we found a little gravel landing area right next to this very powerful little stream that was rushing by. And I looked down, and I'm staring at a footprint that's wider than my foot, but not quite as long. I wear a size 16, so it's rare.
You wear a size 16?
I'm not Bigfoot, but
oh my, okay, all right.
I have a Bigfoot, and there it was. And I looked around. I turned left. I turned right. I looked around. I said, "Oh my God, somebody's making fun of me or something." And as I knelt down and I looked at the footprint, you could actually see the gravel was fine enough that you could see that the big toe on the right foot had lifted up and its next step was into the water. And I thought I could hear voices talking. It could have been the stream. It was kind of hard to tell. My son was just throwing rocks, so it could have been a mixture of things. But I thought I heard something talk or say something. I don't know, maybe not. A little later in the day, after our hike, my son goes inside. I go to the back to my car, and I have a remote, and it pops up the trunk, and it makes beeping sounds as it goes up. So as it goes up, I take my shoes off. They're caked in mud, and I'm putting some other shoes on, and I start hearing this ooh, 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 really loud and very deep. And it was so loud that I could hear, it was like reverberating in me. I could feel it. And I turned around from looking inside my car to looking outside, and I couldn't see anything, but I scanned the woods. I looked everywhere. I almost imagined it was looking right at me, but I just couldn't see it. I don't know where it could have been, but there was a hill behind me that went up several hundred feet, and it could have been anywhere. So, and it could have been 10 feet from me. I couldn't see it. It wasn't there, or at least as far as my senses were where it wasn't there. I couldn't see it. That right there really, I knew something was happening. And I, of course, went inside, looked at my kids, stared at them, just made sure that I thought, did they do something? Were they pranking me again? Still thinking it's a joke. The next day, or I'm sorry, that night, we went to go see Avengers Endgame. Loved that movie. Came back, and we were late. It was like 11:30 at night, and we're driving into this very rural, about a mile off the beaten path of a main road, woods everywhere, pitch dark, not a light to be seen. And my wife's worried about getting all the junk out of the back seat because the kids ate a candy bar or something. And I'm standing outside and my hair is just raising. Like I feel like something's looking at me. So I'm just telling my wife, just leave it there, leave it there. Let's just go in the house. So I walk behind her and, we go inside the house, and I just had the creepiest feeling. Later that night, we're not quite in bed yet. We're just kind of, not ready for bed. I just get this overwhelming sense that something's looking at me through the window. I take off. So I'm a pretty big guy, 6'4". I take off my hoodie, my zip hoodie, and I hang it over the door because I feel like something's looking at me. I look out the door. I flash my little iPhone flashlight out the door. I don't see anything, but I feel like something's looking at me. I go to bed. We all go to bed. About 3 or 4 in the morning, I hear a single one bark, like a dog bark, but a loud dog bark, just one bark. And it kind of got me, the wheels turning in my head. I couldn't go back to sleep. I don't know why. The next morning, we're getting ready to go, and I'm putting some stuff in the car, and I turn around and look out the front door, and about 100 feet away, 35 yards, 125 feet, somewhere in that range, something is staring at us by a tree. And I took a picture of it with my iPhone. Again, it's 100 and some feet away. Like, it's just not going to be a great picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I took it and I told my wife, do you see what I'm seeing? She's like, oh, it's a log. I'm like, it can't be a log because I have a picture of the same spot the day before and there was nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
So how could it be? How could a log have appeared in 24 hours? We didn't have any storms, nothing. So I went out. I was going back and forth, putting stuff in the car, going back to the cabin, coming back, and it was still there. So then I just thought to myself, okay, I'm seeing things. It's a log. She's right. So I stared at it for a few more minutes. I went and locked the door. And as I stood on the top of the porch on this cabin, I kept staring at it. And then I saw it turn its head. And I'm like, holy shit.
No.
It's real. Now, remember how you said you'd like to have a nice safe sighting? That was a nice safe sighting.
Oh, man.
I got in the car. My wife made a comment. The best comment was, if you think that's what it is, why don't you go down there and see for yourself? Why don't you go check it out? I don't have a gun.
Yeah.
I had a cheesy little knife, but that was it. And it looked, if I had to make a guess, I would say it was easily my size. If maybe bulkier, but smaller, but it was at least 6 foot.
Yeah.
And that to me, and I'm in Virginia, not in Oklahoma or California. I believe these things are in far more places than we know.
Sure. That's incredible. I mean, yeah, that gives me goosebumps just to hear it. And it's also so recent.
It was a year ago, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And gosh.
And I did not feel like a Captain America with Thor's hammer. Not at all.
No. And so in that photo that you took, if you pinch in all the way, is it just really tough to see anything in there?
It's pareidolia. It's pixelated. I had a gentleman draw a picture for me. If you want, I'll send it to you afterwards.
Oh,
and you
please,
can take a look at it. Yeah. I was completely, and of course I looked at my kids. What did you see? I asked my wife, what did you see? And, they were all just like, I don't know, maybe, because they didn't see it turn its head. I was the only one that saw it turn its head. So again, I'm like, well, I saw it turn its head. And they were like, well, I didn't see it turn its head. So
yeah,
it was a little, after that, it was like, we all saw it, but we didn't believe it. And then I saw it turn its head and I believed it. So.
Yeah, that gives me full body goosies. That's incredible. Crazy? That's so fun. And you know what? Just the fact that you're in Virginia, and just kind of like you said, there's so many reports all over. And when people ask, people always ask me, because I did that video about it, so they just assume I'm an expert. And in the Bigfoot community, I'll just say I'm an expert, and then I am an expert, as you know. And so when they go, well, where are they? Aren't they just up in Northern California? I'm like, actually, they're all over. People see them in Florida, they see them in Texas, and on the East Coast, and the West Coast, in the middle of the country, Canada, Russia. I mean, there's just way more of them, I think, than we know. And if they are out there, it's just got to be. I mean, it's just got to be a matter of time because everyone's equipped with a camera now, which is part of the frustration of all this, is that we catch so much. Now, the topic of police brutality and all that. Everyone's got a camera on them, so we see a lot more police brutality. It doesn't mean it's happening more often. It just means that it's being recorded.
Right.
So what's tough is like, why can't we get some more of this? And then every once in a while we'll get a sighting that isn't blurry, or but then it's always hotly debated. Or you'll get a Todd Standing or some guy who says he's got it in a cooler. I mean, there's always something. But I think if it is out there, it's got to just be a matter of time. But in the meantime, hearing stories like that, it's like enough to hold me over, I'd say. It's so fun. It's so creative. It's not fun. It's super dangerous, but also it's fascinating.
I was thankful to walk out of that with no problem. And even if I had a gun, I wouldn't have used it. I don't think I would have I don't think the gun would have made me any braver. I think I would have still just left it alone. So when people say to me, oh, was it an alien? Well, I didn't see anything unusual. And honestly, if it was an alien, I would think an alien would come to more populated areas than hanging out in the woods by a stream. So I didn't think it was anything like an alien. I thought it was more like an ape. I lean, from my sighting, I lean more towards ape than I do anything else, because that's what it looked like.
Right. Yeah. I like to tend to agree with you there. And also that's us being human, is we're always going to try and attach it to something that we already understand because it helps us understand it, yeah. If maybe after this you send me the address of that Airbnb, and if I ever get the guts, I'll go down there.
Fair enough. So what's your favorite Bigfoot movie?
Well, just because of the fact that I saw it at such a young age, it would definitely be Harry and the Hendersons. I've rewatched it a couple times in the last couple years, and I still think it holds up. I think there's some really funny moments in it, and I would not consider it to be an accurate depiction of how I would expect a Bigfoot to behave. Other than that, I've kind of honestly been more disappointed with any of the recent outings. Maybe there's one that you recommend that I haven't seen, but I know Bobcat Goldthwait made a movie called Willow Creek and I love him as a comedian, and I think he's an incredible filmmaker. I just thought his attempt at a Bigfoot horror movie was a little lazy, and I always, and film is another interest of mine, and I always thought that there hasn't been a great Bigfoot movie, and I even pitched one around town, but there hasn't been a great one because of all these found footage movies. And this is kind of what happened with Bobcat's movie, was that there's a lot of found footage type movies, they're super easy to shoot, but there's never really a great reveal of the monster. And in order to have a great reveal, you've got to have a great suit. In order to have a great suit, you've got to have money and like somebody who knows how to make a great costume. And I don't think CGI would work that well for something like that right now. But every sort of one of these, kind of like when you start scrolling through Netflix or iTunes and you start like trying to find a Bigfoot movie, and then they're all kind of like a B level sort of found footage horror, and it's nothing I've seen has been something that I would recommend, to be honest. But if you've got any recommendations, let me know.
If you like a scary Bigfoot movie, I think Primal Fear, I believe that's the name of it, is pretty good. But we're gonna find out here pretty soon. Mel Brooks's son, his name
Max?
is Max. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Max.
Devolution, his book, is being turned into a movie. I think it said Legendary Pictures was going to
Yes.
is going to make it. I think that's going to be great. I mean,
yeah, World War Z was incredible. He has enough clout in the biz to hopefully get some real money behind something that isn't a massive disappointment, and then actually shows a really well done creature. I think that's a great one to look for.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But before we wrap this up, are you going to be discussing this interview on pajama pants?
Yeah. No, yeah, I actually will. You just got to let me know when you're planning on putting it up. I'm going to record one tomorrow, I think. We're recording 2 tomorrow, so I will mention it, and you'll get a few of our very small listenership to come over and check out your podcast, which, it's funny because on our podcast, which is like mostly like it's just 3 people talking. A lot of it is about acting, and a lot of it's about The Sopranos and movies and stuff. But every once in a while, I'll try and squeeze in talk about high strangeness and like paranormal and Sasquatch. And like every time I do, somebody will send me a DM or on Twitter or Instagram and be like, "Hey, like, do you have more information about that thing you were talking about?" And I know people out there are thirsty for it. So I think you'll get a couple people to come over. I think it'll be good for you.
Well, you probably haven't listened to my YouTube channel. You've got way too many things going on in your life. But I share encounter stories as well as do the interviews. Just kind of mix it up. And I don't have a lot of encounter stories simply because I don't have. I get a little bit of a flow of emails, that people will send me, and then I always have to do my due diligence and call them back or email them back or ask questions, just because, a lot of times the information just isn't whole. So I want to find the gaps in the holes, and I want to be able to fill them in. And I don't know if they're telling me the truth or not. I would hope they're telling me the truth, but there's some really good encounter stories on my channel, and if you ever just want to listen to one, pick one. I even put the story that I just told you on there, and I like doing it. I just I can't pump them out real fast because a lot of times I'm waiting on people to get back to me, and people get frustrated with me and leave me comments and what's this? Is that it? Is there any more? What's your problem? Or
and to be honest, I've thought about doing something very similar, but I understand that's that would be the bottleneck, is quality encounter stories. And it's another reason why I get skeptical of other podcasts that somehow come out once or twice a week with 2 or 3 encounters a pop. It doesn't mean they're not real or not doing their due diligence, but there's always a part of me that's like, it can't be that easy. But who knows? I appreciate you taking a real thoughtful approach in regards to who you bring on and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, you were a gamble, because I just thought to myself, like, are you gonna, since you're a comedian by trade, I was just like, are you just gonna come on and just bash me, or are you really gonna talk about Bigfoot? But I'm really
why would I do that? No, I am so into it. I hope I hope to come on and learn something. That's and share. And I've had a little bit of a run in this myself, so it's not like I don't know anything either. I have my own experience, and the only thing I feel like I could really use is a valid encounter story. But unfortunately, you just can't force those. But it's one of those things that when I'm in bed at night and when I'm praying, I'm trying to send a message to the aliens that I hope are hovering above my house. I let them know. I do a couple things. I let them know that I'm okay to abduct, and if they want to abduct me and perform some tests, as long as they're nice to me, I'm okay to take. And then also, I put out my feelers for a Bigfoot encounter, just in case some sort of vibrational frequency out there. I'm kind of hitting the I agree button, And if I'm ever out in the woods again, hopefully, there's just something to being out there that's, even if you're not in a place that supposedly has a rich history of sightings or anything, just being out in the woods is there's a feeling that you get, and it's kind of like the same feeling when I'm out in the middle of the ocean or near the ocean, and it's kind of like, yeah, that's just not a place for me and humans, and that's for somebody or something else out there, and I should do my best to stay out of it, but God, would I love to see one.
I'll tell you, you've got a great future ahead of you. Again, I love that. I love that podcast, and one of the things that I and yeah, you don't talk about cryptids, obviously, but you have talked about a lot of things. You talked about killer bees and uh, Robert's experience outside after being inside for so long, and
Yeah, Robert tends to steer the conversation to reality shows a lot, and I will always try and squeeze in something about cryptids whenever it's value or it comes up in the news
yeah,
or something like that.
I saw you fondling your Bigfoot cast on one of the shows. You were. Where did you get that? That was a pretty neat
Fondle
one.
them off and on camera. That's what I got from Dr. Jeff Meldrum. That's the
Oh,
Patty cast. Yeah. So that supposedly is a replica of it's a cast of the original cast that they got from the Bluff Creek sighting.
that's amazing. Wow, and he gave it to you. Wow, that's
Well,
very
no, I bought it. Let's not.
Oh, okay. You bought it. Okay. He's got
Yeah.
thousands of those.
Jeff Meldrum, let's just say Jeff Meldrum knows how to make a little bit of money when it comes to the Bigfoot stuff. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't. He absolutely should. But to get him to come on our show, we paid him a rate, and then he invited us to his office, and where he gave us the opportunity to purchase additional stuff, and it was all totally reasonably priced and well worth it in my eyes to take home. I also got a knuckle print, which I have since I moved, I've misplaced. But there is a knuckle print that I have that is very, very interesting, and it's huge, and it really gives you a good size of what the hands of these things could look like.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I just realized your avatar is not the most interesting man in the world. That's Jeff Meldrum.
That's right. I use that avatar for a number of things. I use it for my Steam profile. So when I play games, that's my profile, and generally, that's the man I look up to right there, Dr. Jeff Meldrum.
He's a smart guy who can make money.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right.
Well, Kassem, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, let me know when it comes up, and I'll make sure to let the guys on Pajama Pants know. But I really appreciate you even asking me. It means a lot.
Oh, of course. Hold on just 1 second.
Sure.
That was a lot of fun talking to Kassem, and I think you can kind of get my idea of podcasts is to kind of have a wide-ranging variety of different kinds of people who like Bigfoot and want to talk about Bigfoot and share their experiences. And thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. On the next podcast, I'm going to mix it up a little bit and share another one of my favorite short encounter stories from a man that was in Bluff Creek during the days of Patterson and Gimlin. Stay tuned and have a great evening.